Hey, it's Jack the Lobster, and today I'm talking about Fallout. If you're familiar with the Fallout game franchise, then you will know all about the vaults and the horrific history with some of the most evil experiments ever conducted. So I'm going to be discussing the history of vault-tec and Fallout. So if you want to know about the vaults, or you already know about the vaults but want to hear more, stick around. Vault-tec Corporation, who were in contract with the US government, had to build vaults across the country to protect a selected portion of the US population in case of a nuclear holocaust, so they could eventually go out, repopulate America, and rebuild society. The origins of the Vault network date back to the early 2050s, when the Euro-Middle Eastern War, the new plague, and the collapse of the United Nations caused a nationwide scare. So the US government set Project Safe House in motion in 2054. The massive national defense endeavor was intended to create a shelter if there was ever a nuclear war or break. Breakthroughs in construction techniques helped the bunkers to be constructed rapidly. The problem was that the government didn't have enough money to fund all of the bunkers, so they were forced to finance the project with junk bonds, and even then could only pay for 122. Only allowing 0.1% of the population to keep their lives if there was ever a nuclear war. This is because they were so expensive. Vault 13 was expected to cost $400 billion, but it ended up costing a massive $645 billion. Most of the project was classified due to it being such a big part of the national defense. This led to mass embezzlement and corruption. The company also claimed that the chance of the bunkers failing was 1.7 million to 1, but this claim was very far from the truth. After the success of vault-tec's demonstration vault, they won the bid. The vault construction took place rapidly and most were completed by 2063. The construction for some vaults was delayed, particularly Vault 13, which only began construction in 2063, and the network surrounding Washington DC, and some were delayed due to stoppage. Over time, people began to disregard the drills that took place in the completed bunkers and stopped showing up, further limiting the vault's role in ensuring the survival of humanity. Additional problems are caused by consistent mismanagement and embezzlement, yet for all of these problems they were still able to make a number of miracle technologies and develop shelters that really protected inhabitants, well, as long as they worked properly. Okay, now this is where it gets actually interesting. You've heard about the vault's origin and why the US government wanted to create them. I'm now going to explain why they were actually created. The real problem with the vaults was that the conspiracy never intended for them to be shelters for preserving humanity. After they established control over Project Safe House, they subverted it for their own means. Rather than an act to save humanity, the vaults were built to test the population as part of the Societal Preservation Program. Of the 122 known public vaults, only 17 of the vaults were designed to work properly as control vaults. Their vaults were presented with a variety of scenarios ranging from annoying to downright lethal to gauge how humans acted in these scenarios for their own nefarious purposes. Some were not provided with enough food synthesizers for their population, others had only men in them, or were designed to open prematurely. The purpose of this experiment was to gather data for the Enclaves project, the exact purpose of which is unknown. Additionally, vault-tec had its own plans for vaults, using them as test environments to create technologies that could be used to redefine society. For this purpose, an entire vault was set aside to act as proving grounds, intended to test a variety of prototype devices with the aim of rolling them out through the rest of the vaults. Once Vault 88 was fully operational, the company expected to roll out new devices every physical quarter. Unlike other vaults, vault-tec would send test subjects before any disaster scenario, starting in early 2078. Human lives were considered irrelevant, with quick rotation time given a priority. The prototypes were meant to convert useless exercise into a socially useful activity, manipulate the moods of the dwellers, or even develop crude forms of mind control. Ethical concerns were dismissed as counterproductive and automatic. Now to the last topic, the Great War. Infamous for lasting only 2 hours, wiped out 9 October 23rd, 2077, the Great War came. The vault-tec air raid sirens blared, but as I said earlier, many people disregarded the sirens, believing it was only a drill. This resulted in few people going to the shelters. They were sealed, and the experiment entered their decisive phase. The control vaults functioned as intended and protected their populations. Others were not so lucky. Within the next few decades, many vaults would fail as a result of the tests. The few that did survive would often prosper. In 2091, after receiving the all-clear signal, Vault 8 opened and Vault City was founded. A year later, the demonstration vault in the ruins of Los Angeles opened. The inhabitants founded the Boneyard. Years later, Vault 15 opened, while a large portion of the vault inhabitants that left the overcrowded vault were band together into the raided tribes as the winter of 2097 came, marking the beginning of the Khans, Vipers, and Jackals. The remaining vault dwellers would found Shady Sands in the spring of 2122. The town used its gek well. No one expected that these humble beginnings would eventually accumulate in the formation of the mighty new California Republic. There was a darker side to the vaults. As protective as they would also ensure that the population within would be kept put for whatever purpose someone with less than ethical intentions might have for them, such as was the case in 2155 when the Master's forces captured a caravan of vault dwellers from the LA Vault. He learned the location of the vault and moved his base of operations there. Learning of other vaults in the area, he realized the occupants were perfect subjects for his project. 80 years later, vaults would serve another nefarious purpose. As the Enclave, the architects of the original experimentation program, raided Vault 13 on March 16, 2242. The inhabitants were taken to the oil rig, so the inoculation rendering humans immune to the FEV-based toxin could be tested. By 2287, almost no functional Vault series shelters remain. The only known vault that continues to function in its intended capacity, at least as far as the dwellers are concerned, is Vault 81. After 2 centuries of use, it is still in a state of advanced disrepair, in spite of the maintenance efforts by its inhabitants. And there you have it, Fallout for Dummies, the history of the vaults. You're now an expert in Fallout lore. I mean, you know the basics. And if you have any idiot friends or family members you want to learn about Fallout, then send this video to them. And if you enjoyed the video, maybe subscribe.